Hey, everybody. Welcome into the December 8th edition of Fill in the Blanks. Can't believe I'm saying that anything is a December edition of anything, but that is how fast and how slow 2020 has gone this year. And you know what, Jarvis? That's about how it's gone for Falcons Nation. It's been a fast and slow 2020 season. Fast whenever the Falcons can actually finish the deal, which they've done, 4 times this year?
Right.
8 times, however. It has been an absolute slow go, just like what we saw on Sunday. So let's start right there. It's interesting because you've had conversations, I've had conversations, whether that was with each other, whether that was on our main station, 92.9 The Game, and the conversation, the needle hasn't moved. And Jarvis, I'm going to throw something at you that I thought was funny, and I'm going to ask you to answer it, and then I'll chime in. So you guys may not know, but Jarvis and I literally have media availabilities with the Falcons, along with the other members of the press corps, 4 days out of the week, Monday being the kickoff day, right?
Right.
So yesterday, we meet with the head coach, Raheem Morris, the defensive coordinator, special teams coaches, and numerous players. So Monday is typically Raheem's first of 4 days of meeting with the press, along with Dirk Cutter and players. We got AJ Terrell yesterday. So the question was posed actually more so to Dirk Cutter, but somewhat to Raheem Morris, of what were maybe 3 things you learned in Sunday's loss to the Saints? So Jarvis, the answers were no different than what any of us would have said, but I'm going to throw it to you first. And then I'm going to tell you what the coach's answers were in terms of what things you learned, old or new, about the Falcons in the loss on Sunday.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is the word inconsistent. I think that this team has been. I always joke that like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yes.
When you talk about, there are games where the defense plays really well and the offense takes advantage of that. And there are times when they don't take advantage of that, and that's what we saw on this past Sunday. And we saw it in the first game. In the first half, that defense played well enough for them to get out to a lead and force Taysom Hill, like we talked about ad nauseum, about forcing him to pass the football and making them one-dimensional. So I think that first thing is definitely inconsistency. I think 2 is when this defense has played well with what they have on that side of the football, meaning they don't really have any consistent pass rushers who put their hand in the dirt every play. I think it has exposed this offense to what it really is.
Yes.
And that exposure has shined the light solely on Dirk Cutter. And that has led to them not being able to get into the score in the red zone. And because a lot of times people used to put the blame on the defense because Dan Quinn's a defensive coach. Why can't the defense play well? But now you have a scenario where even when this defense isn't playing that well, they still aren't really giving up points. They give up a lot of yardage. Give up a lot of yards, but they have been finding ways to make teams kick field goals for the most part. So I think that the second thing that really stands out to me is that the defense playing well enough to win games, and this offense with all the talent that it has, with all of the names and the big boy contracts that they have, it has really shined a light on how inept this offense really is. And lastly, for me, I think that it is Dirk Cutter's very old school way of thinking, and not being innovative, and how he is a very old school play caller. And a lot of times, like, people throw that term out there, and it's a good thing. I'm not doing that in this particular case. I'm doing it because it's a negative thing. It's something that I feel like it's going to be the reason why Raheem Morris does not get this job, is because of Dirk Cutter. I think Dirk Cutter has been that bad at his job that he's not going to afford the opportunity Raheem Morris is not going to be afforded the opportunity to be able to be the head coach of his team.
Right. So you put a lot of things in there to unpack. But to answer the question for you guys, Dirk's response was essentially he gave 2 things he learned, really didn't kind of give 3. But his answers were, we need to score in the red zone and not just field goals, but we need to score touchdowns in the red zone and we need to run the ball. To which, let me respond to those things first, and then let me try to see if I can unpack at least some of what you said, Jarvis, because there was a lot in there. But
no, that was a lot, yeah.
but again, I can't blame you for that one, because there's nothing that you said that is not consistent with what we've seen across 12 games, win or lose, in most instances, win or lose. But with the red zone piece, yeah, absolutely agreed that they need to score. But to me, the learning was more of, but what is the philosophy about the schemes you put in place when the defense gives you the opportunity? We are talking about a Saints team that was driving. Taysom Hill is at the 12-yard line about to punch that thing in and literally put this game to bed. And out of nowhere, here comes Stephen Means with his 2nd sack of the day. So it's a strip sack, fumble, and who, of course, none other than Debo, of course, is going to be on. Of it was those questionable calls at the end of the game. I leaned over to you and I said, one of the questions I had was, where's the tempo? Where's the tempo? We're talking about essentially a little over 2 minutes. And specifically, I remember at the minute 41 mark was maybe the first moment where we saw a slight bit of tempo, but I was looking for no huddle. I was like, you just absolutely don't. Exactly. Have a sense of urgency. Don't you let the Saints reset. Don't let Sean Payton. Goes back to, yes, red zone efficiency is the issue, but the question is more of, why is it an issue when you finally have that opportunity? You and I talked about the fact that Julio Jones was back. That was going to be huge. The fact that Calvin really didn't have that pesky Janoris Jenkins, that should have been huge as well. And they got the numbers, but the question is, where did we go with them, or where did the Falcons go with them when it counted? So we all kind of head scratched when it was 3 consecutive plays. We get that Todd Gurley actually had positive yardage on the first of those 3 run calls. But on the second call and on the third call, and granted, if you call something for him to basically run straight up the gut to the end zone and he decides to bounce out, well, you can't coach him into making that different decision.
Factor there, right? Yeah.
You said there is what?
I said there's an execution factor there,
Exactly, right. So yeah, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because that was one of the things that you mentioned as well in one of our post-game hits. But going back to that play, you're talking about 3 runs, and then we go to Julio Jones on 4th and 9, whereas to me, that aggressive play should have come 3 plays ago, maybe even 2 plays ago, but definitely not 4th and 9. So it does go back to, when you get to the red zone, especially when you get to the low red zone, what are what's the rationale behind the play calling? That's part 1 of what he said. And then part 2 was the run game. And the thing of it is, I did ask the question about, why what was schemed to allow Caleb McGarry to have a little bit more success against Cam Jordan. And there was a little nod to the O-line and kind of scheming, but there was more of a nod to, hey, we're sticking with the run game. Dirk Cutter said, hey, I know you guys aren't going to like me saying that. And I thought, well, no, if that's what your rationale is, it is what it is. But my question is, it's the moments when you stuck to the run game that were head scratchers. Not just that you stuck to it. You do have to make the defense honest. It's the moments that you stuck to it that made us scratch our heads. Now, let me ask you this question before we attempt to wrap up on the Falcons and move on to the Hawks. You talked about 2 things, one of which was the Falcons, and whether or not it was and is a 50-50 blame to go around. And if you guys notice, we aren't talking offense, because that defense played its heart out especially in the second half. Other than giving up that opening drive in the third quarter, they kept the Saints completely in check. So that's why our attention is on the offense. And we don't need to talk special teams when Younghoe Koo is out there hitting 3 for 3 in every extra point that, the one extra point he had an opportunity to kick. Jarvis. why do you say, that it's a 50-50 issue? 50% is on the scheming and the coaching, and 50% is on the players and the execution. That's part one. And part two is, and you kind of alluded to this, have we, in these last couple of years, maybe given a little too much of a nod to the quote unquote talent that is on the Falcons roster, particularly on offense?
The reason why I say 50-50 is because I'm looking at the totality of this regime, meaning Dirk Cutter as a play caller the last 2 years. Because when you look at it, there have been times where Matt Ryan has missed throws. There's been times where Matt Ryan has not gotten the ball to where it needs to be in order for their wide receiver to be able to make a play. And I think there has been times where the offensive line had given him time. We saw that last time against the Saints. You're talking about giving up 8 sacks. Like, what quarterback is going to get sacked 8 times and still be successful and have an opportunity to win the game? No. I go ahead. I don't care who it is back there, because when you're talking about guys just peeling back and knowing that you have to throw the ball to get back into the football game, and you can't run the football, you're one-dimensional. All that falls back on execution and guys just being better than you. They're whooping you, and that quarterback isn't going to be able to function in that in a state like that, because that is a horrible place for a quarterback to be, and that's what defensive linemen live for. So so when I say 50-50, I really mean that I'm not necessarily looking at this season. This season, shoot, if you really want to know, I'll probably go 70-30.
That's why I asked that question, because I said, wow, Jarvis is being very generous with that 50-50, but I hear you.
So if I put these 2 years together and just look at the totality of it, I have to go with 50-50, because there were times last year where Matt Ryan, he just struggled. There were times where he could have been better, and not having a run game and that offensive line not protecting, and the musical chairs that was played last year up front, and those guys not be able to get the job done. I just it's hard for me to put it solely on coaching.
Absolutely. No different than looking at the talent and making that honest assessment of whether or not maybe they're kind of sort of, give them a little too much credit, maybe overhyped.
And because we're used to the names, right? We always going to be forever embedded in our minds that Matt Ryan won the MVP in 2016. Always. Julio Jones is going to the Hall of Fame. So it's hard to be hypercritical of him because of what he's done and what he has had to deal with being here
and playing through the injuries.
Playing through all the injuries, and not necessarily being, how can I say this, more with the type of talent that he has and ability that he has, it's not getting to the end zone as he should. I think those numbers are a little bit lower than I believe they should be. And there are a lot of people that agree with me on that, and so and I'm sure you do as well. So I think that when you have that scenario playing out like it did, like it has been throughout the entire time, it's hard to bring criticism on those guys. But I think that it's going to be very interesting to see the type of personnel evaluator they bring in here, and the guy who's going to be the head guy coming into this season.
And so, as much as we would love to kind of touch on that piece, because we know the rumors are starting, especially around the GM job.
Right.
We've got more than enough time. I'm talking at a minimum the next 4 weeks, because we're going into the final stretch of the NFL season. So, fill in the blanks family, trust me, we will get into the search for the next GM, the search for the next head coach soon enough. And we do want you guys to chime in on that as well, because we know that everybody has a lot to say. But we would absolutely be remiss if we did not talk about what's going down in 3 days at State Farm Arena. And what's going down in State Farm Arena in 3 days is the new look Hawks are going to be on the floor for the very first time as a team, as a unit for the first time, but also, of course, for the core coming back from the 2019-2020 season. Those guys have been waiting for 9 months, literally, to hit the floor. So, I mean, chomping at the bit. So they're going to take on the Magic a couple times. They're going to take on the Grizzlies a couple times before, of course, they kick off the season on December 23rd. So that being said, Jarvis, I want to talk about a couple things that I thought were interesting. Of course, Travis Schlenk said just earlier this morning on 92.9 Game on the morning show, when he was asked the question about expectations on wins and that sort of thing, he shied away from giving a number, which is, that makes sense. Yeah. It was more about the new look format for the playoffs and sort of the play-in option for this coming season that'll put a 9th and a 10th place team right there on the cusp of being able to do something, but also saying basically, I expect you all to be right there in the mix, whether you're 7, 8, 9, or 10, you be right there on the cusp. So we know that the expectations are high. The players have not shied away from those expectations, nor has Lloyd Pierce since before this new season ever started. But the players are really, really excited and in their feelings all at the same time, because when the first half season schedule came out, the Hawks had exactly one nationally televised game. So I'm going to ask a loaded question, but let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. Are these new look Hawks being disrespected, overlooked, or brushed aside fairly, justifiably, or
not? First thing that comes to my mind, justifiably, because they ain't won yet. You know, to be honest with you. So, but looking at it from, you know, born and raised Atlanta, on-air host, you know, podcast host type person, if you are looking at what the Hawks have done and and has looked at what they're bringing back, it's disrespectful. But just from a typical Atlanta, nobody takes us seriously.
Right.
As when I say us, I mean this city, as a sports town, they're not a threat, you know, because it just about on paper, it doesn't look like a team that can contend for a championship, which I understand. However, there is an opportunity there for these guys to make some noise. Based off of who they brought in, because when you talk about bringing in a guy coming off a championship in Rajon Rondo, you have a guy in Bogdanovich. Say that threat fast 3 times. A guy who has a lot of confidence. I think I'm going to really like this dude.
And Danilo Gallinari.
And Danilo
Gallinari. They're showing some ATL swag already.
Right, and he's coming off the bench.
Coming off the bench swagging.
So it's there's a lot of stuff to really like about this team and their makeup. I just think that the crucial time, the most crucial time for this team, for me, is going to be the beginning of the season. How fast of a start they're able to get off to, and that's asking a lot, because what you bring in, they have 9 new guys on the roster, so that is going to be a tough task. And I think that Lloyd Pierce is going to be on Lloyd Pierce to get it done, or get those guys ready and get them off to a good start.
Agreed. And when I looked at the breakdown of who got scheduled nationally televised games and who didn't and why, I was a little bit in my feelings when I saw the Suns and a couple other teams ahead of the Hawks, but then I thought, they kind of had some last minute pushes.
Made a little noise, in the bubble,
Yeah, exactly. Made a little noise towards the end of the bubble, so that's probably why they got, the deference, if you will. But like you said, you have to win. You have to win, and winning is what cures everything. I do agree with Trae Young that being an ATL, you know what the new uniforms look like. And even before you knew what the new uniforms look like, they always play on MLK Day. So why wouldn't that game have been? Now that was the one that was an affront to me.
That's a head scratcher.
Yeah,
you're talking about MLK Day.
Right, the team that has a whole court dedicated,
right, a whole
uniform
dedicated to him, and they're not playing. Come on, man,
everything they are. And so, listen, James Narcisse says that he thinks that it's going to take about 10 games for them to gel. You are actually being very liberal, James, because I think about some of the issues. I go back to Golden State's first 20 or so games with Kevin Durant, where they were trying to figure out where to fit him in and trying to tell him, BKD, don't try to, shrink
don't try to fit in.
Exactly. Don't try to fit in, be you and do you. And then once they gave him the cosign to be able to do him, about 20, maybe 30 games in, that's when you saw the Warriors take off and become the beast that we saw. I'll even say last year with Anthony Davis and LeBron James trying to figure out, whose team is it at what moments should, LeBron step up and AD fall back, and how do we blend in all of these other kind of role players, if you will. That took a while. That might not have really started to show itself until really the back half of the season. And then honestly, you look at the Clippers, that never really came together.
No,
that never really came together. So James, I'm thinking really it's going to be at least 20 games, if not a little bit more, because like Travis Schlenk said, you're talking about youngsters who have always been that guy. And you're talking about them trying to figure out, okay, what if I'm not that guy? What if I'm coming off the bench, or, my minutes are shared, or I'm being asked to move to the 4 or the 3 when I'm a natural 4, but for this particular setup and scheme that Lloyd Pierce has in this rotation, I need to be the 3 just for now. Those are the kinds of things where, like you said, James, regardless of, you're saying gelling doesn't mean win. We're not necessarily talking about completely winning either, but let's just face it. That's a part of the equation, a big part of the equation.
How are going to be judged?
How else do you evaluate it? Because you getting a 105, to 95 loss, an L is an L. So to me, you look like you might not have gelled. But if I'm seeing you win games, that's when I'm starting to think, okay, you're right there. The other piece there is I want to see in these preseason games, especially, kind of how Lloyd Pierce is going to play around with the rotations, because he spent a lot of time doing that in the back half of last season. And right around that last week or two is where you started to see those rotations really come together, and you started to see, oh, okay, I can see what philosophy he's trying to put forth. He was really trying to
question. He was questioning a lot, though.
He was questioning a lot
when it comes down to the late in the games and stuff like that. So
every press conference, somebody had something to say about that rotation. But when you started to see it coming together, and you started seeing that he was subtly and quietly pushing, especially pushing about defense, that's when it started to make sense, and that's when you started to kind of see them gel. Flipping.
Can I say before we move on? So it's in regards to that, though. Like, I think one of the things people have to really pay attention to, I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to, is Nate McMillan was brought in to be put on his coaching staff. Nate McMillan is the only guy who has head coaching experience outside of Lloyd Pierce, of course. So keep an eye on that. Those two things that you mentioned, defense and rotations. We all know how rotations work. And I think there are a lot of people, if you don't know, the relationship between Trae Young and Lloyd Pierce hasn't always been that great.
Right.
So I think that's something to keep an eye on. That's why I mentioned it is vital. It is very important for them to get off to a good start. I know, like I said, with all these new additions, Lloyd Pierce will have to be really on point, because if Tony Ressler doesn't like what he sees, I would not be shocked at all if Nate McMillan slides over into that head spot.
Yeah, because there were questions on whether or not Lloyd Pierce would literally make it past the All-Star break last year. And he made it through, and then we saw good things on the other side of it, but there was no guarantee that we were going to see Lloyd Pierce after that break. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking to see, okay, everybody's talking a good game. All the players are talking a good game about their commitment to defense, but show and prove. As we wrap up, Jarvis, saw some interesting news coming out of the Big Ten. Ohio State and Michigan has been called off for this Saturday. And listen, we know that the Big Ten was going to hold off for as long as they could on calling that game because things, you got big things at stake. In fact, interesting that we find out that information today because, of course, this is what the third week of college football playoff rankings coming out, right?
Right.
And we've been talking about really the same four teams from day one. It's really always been Alabama, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Clemson, with Texas A&M sort of on the outside, kind of looking in to see how they might get in. But boy, we talked about this at length last week on the podcast as well as on our show on 92.9 The Game, 6 o'clock on Saturday night. So we'll be taking you into that Hawks preseason game this in the coming weeks. So just kind of look out for that. But ultimately, we talked about what could happen if a big game got canceled and then you're forced to deal with the likes of, wow, the ACC opponents, they played, or potential representatives played 10 games. The SEC representatives played 10 games. You're barely getting 6 games. Now, I'm going to hold my thought on that for a second because I want to hear what you have to say. But a lot of what's been bantered around is, will you be able to see the quality of the product that Ohio State is putting out there if they're only able to show you 6 times in the year?
Ah, man, whatever.
And I think, there you go. Yep. Okay, good. We're right there.
Here's the thing, like, we already know what time it is when it comes to who's the best 4 teams. We talked about, you named it. Yeah. Notre Dame, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama. Now, if Clemson just so happens to lose to Notre Dame in the ACC championship, that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Right.
Talking about
Florida beats Alabama.
Florida beats Alabama. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we got different conversations going.
But going into this season, the Big Ten, they made these rules because that's kind of how the NCAA works. They don't get involved in this type of stuff for some odd reason. But they like to monitor everything else. But the pandemic goes down. Oh, no, we ain't got anything to say about that. Y'all handle that. But they said before the season starts, they have to play 6 games.
6 games,
to get into the Big Ten championship.
That's right.
So here, Ohio State they're 5-0. And guess what? They don't have 6 games.
Right.
And Michigan just got canceled. So they're going to have to figure out how to play somebody. They're going to have to call somebody. They're going to have to make a phone call or do a favor. My whole thing is, Texas A&M, they're on the outside looking in. They don't have a game. That game just got canceled.
Yep.
Why not Ohio State? Texas A&M, make their phone call. Call them. Call them.
Yeah.
You want to prove that you're worthy of being in that Final Four. I'm talking about to Ohio State. Yeah. Beat Texas A&M. Beat that SEC team that's on the outside looking in. Beat them.
Absolutely.
And then you can say, okay, now can we get in?
Yeah. Now, right.
That's
exactly.
line.
But here's the thing.
Who to play.
Right. We know that this college football playoff representation selection process has so many subjective components to it.
Indeed.
Now, don't get me wrong. There have been years, the head scratcher year where Alabama got in and everybody was like, no. And then they won.
Yeah.
And they won. So to me, name recognition means a whole heck of a lot as well. And basically, So the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be pushing, probably behind the scenes, college football, however you want to call it, Big Ten, whoever's name you want to put on there, is going to be pushing behind the scenes for Ohio State to get in, because at the end of the day, you want to see who you want to see. And they want this college football season that's been so up and down due to coronavirus, due to the cancellations, the postponements, the reschedules, the late starts that we're not playing and now we're playing. They want it still to end the same way as always, that at a minimum, the top 4 teams are in the college football playoff. Maybe there's a question about team number 5, team number 6, whether or not they should have gotten in, but they want those marquee names. And Ohio State is that.
Yeah.
And when and they've played, they've balled. They balled in these five games. Like, that's the one good thing. They have put the resume together. Justin Fields has played for the most part at the highest level. They've put the resume together. It's just going to be interesting to see who is Ohio State going to chase down, because we know that there are teams out there. Honestly, it could be a money grab for many of them. Let's just face it. I mean, yeah, you're going to make a whole bunch of money.
How much is that worth to you?
Exactly.
Like,
hey, we got
you gonna take a butt whooping for how much?
Opportunity. Yeah.
Like, how much do you want for you to come on up here to Columbus and get this game in real quick?
A couple mil.
That's what we need.
Let us
the game,
take this L on the field, and we'll write this check.
And you're going to gain
all will be well.
A lot of games.
All will be well. But what'll be interesting to see, which I don't think they'll do it, by the way, but it'll be interesting to see if they do take on a worthy competitor so that they can, quote unquote, beef up their resume. But let's face it, they don't need to take on Texas A&M. That's not going to do anything for them, but put them in position to possibly lose that game and then buy themselves a way out of the college football playoffs. So I see them taking that cupcake game. They're going to, I think they're going to try to look like they're trying to get Ohio State to 6-0. They'll probably find a suitor. And then next week, you and I will be talking about some of the championship, the conference championship games and what that impact is going to be, because of course we're going to be on before the college football playoff selection committee games. I think that's actually going to be on the 19th. So we might be on twice before they actually make their decision. So it'll be interesting to see when we come back to you guys next Tuesday, what the turn of events has been for Ohio State, or shockingly so, if anybody in that top five who's buying any other teams in that top five are actually going to have any upsets that will overturn the apple cart completely and have us having a whole other conversation. But boy, oh boy, it got real today in college football.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, and I'm all here for it. You know me, I love a good train wreck, especially when it comes to college football, because people are so passionate about their team, and there so many people having so many alliances
beliefs about their conference. And
everybody loves this SEC. Yeah, come on, SEC. Go ahead, line them up and play. Let's see it. Let it play out on the field. That's what that's my motto. Because at the end of the day, like I said, even if Ohio State gets a cupcake and gets their butt kicked in the first round of college football playoff, who you gonna put in there? Cincinnati? Right. Do you really believe Texas A&M is that good? Like, come on.
Not happening. Yeah.
For real. Like, come on. Let's be honest. Like, because like I said, Ohio State has the names. They have the name value. And Ryan Day and Justin Fields, who's a potential Heisman candidate. All those Kyle Trask, those guys gonna have to play up to those billings. They have to play. They're gonna have to, if you want to get in, Dan Mullen. Hey man, your ball's gonna have to ball, and that's it, and that's the bottom line.
And you think about it from a recruiting perspective as well. And of course we know Justin Fields has an outside chance for the Heisman, but you also want to give him one more opportunity to beef up that resume so that he can stay in that conversation with Kyle Trask and stay in that conversation with Trevor Lawrence, because we know pretty much after what happened, I think it's Zach Wilson, after what happened with BYU this past weekend, that kind of put him out of the conversation. So certainly, I'm thinking Ohio State will want to do what they can to help maybe beef up Justin's resume maybe once or twice more before the season wraps up.
Because it's definitely Kyle Trask and Mac Jones.
And Mac Jones, excuse me. Let's not forget Mac Jones. Because literally Trevor Lawrence, unfortunately for him, right, wrong, or indifferent, his battle with COVID kind of put him on the outside looking in. So you've got an SEC title game that might just make the decision on who gets that Heisman this year. But in addition to that, at least if you're Justin Fields, you want one more crack at making the case for yourself. So anyway, we could talk on and on and on. And you know what we do? You know what we do? We talk at 6:00 on Saturdays on 92.9 The Game. So if you want to hear the conversation continue, you should check us out. But Jarvis, where else can they check us out if they want to get a replay of this or any of our other podcasts?
Let's see. So we are on YouTube at Fill in the Blanks. SDA BLANKS. I can barely spell it. On YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts. So, if you aren't on those, I don't know what you got going on in your life, because those are the three big boys as far as from a podcast standpoint. So if you don't want to go there, you can go to Anchor. Go to Anchor.fm, and you can find all of the old episodes, get caught up on what we've been talking about. So you won't be so lost when you check us out every Tuesday at 4 o'clock right here on our Facebook page. So please follow, like, subscribe, all of those good stuff that we have to beg for, in order to build this thing we got going on here, because we got some good stuff going on. And make sure y'all check us out, man. If you don't do anything else in your life.
And you guys can see where you can follow us on Twitter, follow the show at _fill-in-the-blanks. And then on Instagram, you can follow us at these handles, and you can follow the show at fill-in-the-blanks. So listen, if we don't talk to you until Saturday on 92.9 The Game from 6 to 7 for the show, then guess what? That means you need to come follow us on social media and keep the conversation going. Until then, be safe, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week and be like us and check out these new look Hawks on Friday night.
Indeed. I'm excited. But yeah, we'll see y'all next week.